Sudan's Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, say they are ready to join ceasefire talks. This comes after the United States invited warring sides to the table in an effort to end the conflict. US officials will mediate the talks in August, with the African Union, the United Nations and others acting as observers. Now, the war in Sudan has been ongoing for over a year. The Sudanese army has been fighting the RSF over control of the country. The conflict has left thousands dead and more than 10 million displaced. People in Darfur have endured among the worst massacres reported so far, especially the residents of Geneina, the capital of West Darfur, where the paramilitary RSF has indiscriminately attacked men, women and children of any age, according to rights groups and the UN. It has forced many survivors to flee to neighboring Chad. Some 600,000 Sudanese people are now living in refugee camps there. DW's Mariel Muller traveled to Andre in Chad to capture their stories.
Khalil is 9 years old. He had a childhood with no worries until last November. That's when Sudan's Rapid Support Forces came to his hometown, Geneina, and attacked. Khalil still can't speak about what happened that day.
They shot from all four sides like fire. There were many RSF fighters. I don't know which side the bullet came from. We only found him shot.
Khalil was shot in the leg and needed medical care quickly. The family fled to Chad, where doctors amputated his leg. Before this attack, the RSF and allied Arab militias took control of a nearby Sudanese army base. Then they went door to door in Khalil's hometown, systematically looking for members of African ethnic groups like the Masalit community. They raped girls, burned people alive, executed boys and men. They left bodies on the streets to rot. Khalil's father buried 28 people that day, including his nephew.
The men had shot him in the head and his wife in the stomach. I found them inside their house.
During this attack, he remembers RSF fighters using racial slurs.
They abused us. They said, "You are Nawab, Africans. We will kill all of you. You won't have any land. This land will be under our authority, and we will decide who will cultivate it. It's a genocide against us. They don't want any black people to remain."
The United Nations says the RSF and its allies killed an estimated 15,000 people in ethnically motivated massacres in Darfur. Human Rights Watch has also warned of a possible genocide against the Masalit in the region.
First they killed doctors, then they killed teachers. They killed religious leaders and most people with an education. They wanted to end the Masalit people.
Abdurrahman speaks as a community leader and from personal experience. The same men he prayed with in the mosque in the evening abducted 12 members of his family and executed them. His son, a doctor, was killed while working at the hospital. Abdurrahman's surviving family also sought safety in Chad, but suspicion remains. Abdurrahman says their Arab neighbors in Sudan helped the RSF in pointing out Masalit houses during their attack, and some of them now live in a nearby refugee camp. There are other witnesses who corroborate this claim, and some who deny it, like this Arab community leader.
Civilians were never killed. This is a lie. The Masalit are lying. Of those who came to Chad, nobody has hurt them.
The divide runs deep. To prevent conflict, ethnic Arab and ethnic African refugees are staying in separate camps. In their camp, Khalil's parents are happy to watch their son grow up in safety. And it's filling them with hope for the future.
When my son grows up, I hope he'll have a business. I imagine many things for him, working at the mosque and having children too. I just want my son to be happy in this life.
Now, as before, Khalil is happiest when playing football with his friends. The scars of Darfur will remain, but they aren't stopping him from doing what he loves.
Joining me now is Geneina Lewis, a Sudan specialist and human rights consultant. She is currently the senior advisor for PEMA, Preventing and Ending Mass Atrocities. Hello, Geneina. Welcome to the program. We've just heard the RSF agreeing to ceasefire talks with the US. Given the history of failed other attempts, how optimistic can we be about this one?
I'd say we have to measure our optimism in this case. This is the new wind in the ceasefire talks for Sudan. We had the Jeddah process previously, which did include both the RSF and SAF. We achieved very little progress throughout that peace negotiation. So this time around, yes, we have the UAE at the table. We also have the UN, the African Union, and Egypt, who will be there in observer status. And what we really need is for all of these key stakeholders to actually exert their leverage on Sudan, because there is no military solution to this conflict. The only way out is through peace negotiations. But they have to go further this time, and they have to include the highest level of stakeholders. So not just Special Envoy Tom Perriello from the US, but also Secretary Blinken should be in attendance and fully engaged. Right.
I mean, it's been a while that we heard of any negotiations about peace going on. The last was in December when the US was also involved, but that did not work out. Now, you also mentioned the peace talks will include countries, including the United Arab Emirates. They're going to be observers. Reports suggest that the UAE is arming the paramilitary group in Sudan. Why would they do that, and how is that influencing the conflict?
It's a fantastic question, and really one that we should be directing at the Emirati authorities. It seems as though they have pledged their horse. They're calling their horse in this fight, and that is the RSF. They're hoping that when kind of the chips are down at the end of the conflict, that they will be able to manipulate the RSF and use them to access Sudan's very rich resources across the country. But fundamentally, we know that the UAE are providing significant support to the RSF. Excuse me. The UN panel of experts report from January reported that the UAE is providing this support. We need an end to supplies coming in from the UAE, the weapons, but also there are other actors who are influencing the Sudan conflict. There are also weapons coming in from Russia, from Iran. We also have weapons coming in from Turkey, and all of these kind of spoilers to Sudan's transition to a democratic revolution need to be ended. We need an enforcement of the current Darfur arms embargo, but we also need an expansion of the arms embargo to cover the entirety of Sudan.
Right. What we also learned from the report, the UN Special Advisor of the Secretary General on the Prevention of Genocide, that's Alice Nderitu, recently said, and I quote, "We do have circumstances in which a genocide could be occurring or has occurred." Now, you've done extensive research on the Darfur genocide in the early 2000s. How does the current situation in Sudan compare to that?
There are a lot of similarities between this conflict and the one from 2003 onwards. Principally, Burhan as the head of the Sudanese armed forces and Hemeti as the head of the rapid support forces. They were both instrumental in perpetrating the genocide from 2003 onwards. They honed the tactics that they're using today in that conflict. So the mass mobilization of civilians along ethnic lines we saw during the Darfur genocide, but principally the use of hunger as a weapon of war, starvation as a weapon of war. They did that back in 2003 onwards. There were more indirect deaths caused by a lack of humanitarian assistance and a lack of food, a lack of medical assistance from the 2003-2005 period than there were from direct battle deaths. And again, we're seeing the same today, where 15% of the population of Darfur and Kordofan are expected to die due to famine. There is aid available. It's just that we do not have humanitarian access. So it's really on Hemeti and Burhan to allow this assistance to flow into the country. The other similarities include the lack of accountability. There is no real process at the moment. We do have a fact-finding mission from the UN, but this needs better support. It needs better funding and resourcing so that they can do the documentation work. And the Sudanese who are on the ground, continuing to risk their lives to document the violations that are occurring on both sides, need better support.
Right. I mean, while the war continues, so many people are losing their lives, so many millions are being displaced, and the injury list just continues to pile up. How can humanitarian and aid organizations better support those in need, including children refugees like Khalil, who we earlier saw in the report?
Right. I think the international humanitarian community can be doing a lot more. There is a humanitarian response in Sudan, but it is locally led, principally by young Sudanese men and women who are volunteering to stay on the front lines, to provide community kitchens, to feed their communities. They're providing frontline medical assistance, because there are no functioning hospitals in a lot of these areas. They need to be directly supported by these international donors, by USAID, by the Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office in the UK, who could be providing funds directly to them to continue their work. When we talk about the humanitarian side of this, we can't overstate the tsunami of human suffering that is happening in Sudan right now. And anything that can be done to assist the Sudanese population is action that needs to be taken now. This can't wait a year. This can't wait weeks or months. It has to happen today.
Right. Shanna Lewis, Sudan specialist and human rights consultant. Thank you very much for your insight.
Thank you, Eddie.